Tov. Shavuot Tov. I hope everyone had a nice Shabbat. I'm going to talk about the HaShomronim. Of course, it has to do with Shomron, Samaria, but it's sort of like an additional talk that I did last week about Shomron, which was actually for tourists, but a lot of guides also listened to it. I do want to thank those who participated in our little mini Ishtalmut where we went to Har Gerizim a couple of weeks ago, including the drivers David Schoenfeld and Zvi Besson and a few others who drove also. Whenever we have things like that, come on, people, join in. It's so much fun. We learn so much. Okay, who are the Samaritans? The Samaritans are a group of people today that we know that live in Shomron, and the HaShomronim, Samaritans, and they have their own understanding of who they are, and we have our own understanding. According to the Samaritans, they're the remnant of Israelites who were not deported to Assyria. As we know, when the Assyrians, they came on a conquest to Israel, which is the northern Israel today, Samaria, they did an exchange of populations. They took the people who were not educated, who did not have money, the people that might rebel against the new people, the conquerors, the conquest, and move them. Can you please mute whoever's talking? And move them to Assyria. They brought people, Assyrians, to Shomron, to Samaria, and settled them there. Now, according to Jewish texts, Jewish beliefs, we'll say Judeans, the people who, the Samaritans that we know today, are those who came from Assyria. According to the Samaritans, they are actually the people who stayed in Shomron, meaning they are the original Israelites. They are the people who took the Torah from Moshe, and they continue with the customs and the traditions of the Israelites who walked through the desert. I'm going to go into some of the little nuances and understandings about the Shomronim and some of their customs, traditions, their writings, and so on, just to get a general idea. Can you please mute everybody? According to the Samaritans, I said, they are the original Jews, not the original Jews, the Israelites. They call themselves Israelites. And we're the Judeans. We came from Judea and changed things later on in history. Why isn't it moving down? Okay. Samaritans, their requirements are to reside in the Holy Land, meaning today Israel or Judea and Samaria, participate in the Paschal sacrifice on Passover, follow Shabbat. It is written in the Pentateuch. They do not call it the Torah, they call it the Pentateuch, which is the 5 books of Moses. And that, by the way, is their sole Bible. They have no other books. They only go by the Pentateuch. They have some external books, but they're not written in that period of time. And to adhere to the laws of purity and impurities prescribed by the Pentateuch, specifically with animals, slaughter, also for personal purity. But in today's day, the mikveh is not the important thing. A woman can go take a bath. So there are some things that are in their customs and traditions that contradict what's written in the Torah. Additionally, in their Pentateuch, they have approximately 7,000 different nuances of writing. Sometimes there are words that are very similar to what we write, such as Hashem Amar, and he says, the Samaritans say Shehu Bachar, which means that according to the Judeans or to the Jews, Hashem, God, will show the place, and according to the Samaritans, he already picked it. The principles of faith, to believe in one, it should be one God and not on God, sorry. The God of Israel, which is the same thing as us, except the single prophet of Moses, the son of Amram. They have one prophet, yes. They do believe that there could be another prophet who will come at some time in the future, and he will be a descendant of Moses by the name of Taib. They actually call Moses Taib, not Moshe. But it's not clear when he would come, if he would come. They do not believe in the Mashiach. We believe in the Mashiach. It will come. Everyone will be resurrected in and the Shomonim do not believe in the resurrection anyway. They believe in the Sheol, where people continue their life in the underworld. Of course, they believe in the Pentateuch was handed down by Moshe, and the holy place is on Mount Gerizim. This is a Samaritan fragment, which is from a collection that's found in Wadi Dalia, a cave near the Dead Sea. It dates to the 2nd century before the Common Era. In this cave, they actually found many fragments that are believed, most of them are believed to be of Samaritan texts. The question is, how did Samaritan texts get to the area by the Dead Sea when these were Judeans, we'll call them, of different sects, who went there to get away from the Sadducees at Stukim, and possibly also the Fushim, it depends on who you ask, and moved away from mainstream Yerushalayim. How did the Shomonim get there? We don't know. There's ongoing research today, but why do they assume that this is Shomoni? First of all, some of the text, of course, it's for you and I, we can't really read it. It's very difficult to read. It's not in such good shape. But they found a seal that has the name Balat. Now we know Balat from the Tanakh. Balat, son Balat. Son, that sounds like the son of Balat. But apparently Balat was the grandson or great-grandson of son Balat, who was the governor of Shomron, and his child married one of the priest's children. So we know that there was some mixed marriage in there. We've heard of Balat, son Balat in the past, and because the name is very similar, it's assumed this is a Samaritan text, but some of the texts also are exactly like the texts that are written in the Pentateuch of the Shomonim. A little bit about the calendar. The calendar starts, as opposed to ours, starts from the date of Yeshua ben Nun's entrance into the Promised Land, as opposed to ours on Rosh Hashanah when Borei Olam. The dates are a little bit different, so their calendar is different in that respect. Now, excuse me, the calendar itself is similar to ours. The months are the same, but it doesn't start in the same month. Our year starts in Nisan, the Chodesh Chodeshim, the first month of the year. And in their calendar, it actually starts in Rosh Hashanah, what we call Rosh Hashanah. So it starts at a different period of time, and therefore our calendars are not always exactly the same. They do connect. I think it's twice every 19 years, but it might only be once every 19 years where the date of Pesach is exactly the same. The other dates, obviously, they're off a little bit because I'm not talking about Shavuot is always on a Sunday, so that's usually not on the same day. The calendar itself is set twice a year, once on Passover and once on Sukkot. Now, why is it twice a year? Because those are the dates where it would have been, this is in ancient times, would have been difficult to calculate further in advance. Today, everything's done by algorithm on a computer, but the priests, what they would do is they would calculate when the holidays are. By us, they would do the calculating by Rosh Chodesh. In the Muslims, they still calculate by looking at the moon today and saying, okay, Ramadan's going to start tonight. It might start today in one country, and in another country it'll start tomorrow. But they do set the calendar, and they sell this calendar every year for a half a shekel, which is 5 shekels in today's money. That's the way it goes by them. And the high priest actually checks and calculates and makes sure everything is okay. The high priest in the Samaritans, there's only one, and it's not Yefet that gives the tour in the museum. Yefet is one of the priests. The high priest is the eldest priest in the community. The oldest one today, I think he said, is 89, and there's 3 above Yefet. Yefet's like, I think he said 78 or something. So there are other priests who are in their 80s who they will get a chance when the oldest one passes away, the next one, and the next one. So you always know who the high priest is going to be. It's not by family, it's by age, it's by knowledge. The celebrated feasts that they have are just like ours, more or less. They have Passover, obviously. Matzot, Chag HaMatzot. Chag HaMatzot is one day. Passover is the whole, Chag HaMatzot is the whole week. Passover is the first day. Shavuot Of course, Shavuot, that's probably the most important day for them to be recognized as an individual religion in the sense that they believe in Moshe receiving the Luchot HaBrit on Mount Sinai, and their entire religion is based on that. It's based on Luchot HaBrit and on the Torah and the 5 books of Moses, and therefore it's extremely important. Yom HaTruah, you can probably guess what that is. When do we blow the shofar? It's Yom HaTruah. That's Rosh Hashanah. But again, this is a very, very important period, a very important holiday. But the name is a little bit different for the senses that this is the beginning of their year, but it's to show the people to come and to be closer to their beliefs. I'll put it that way. Okay. Yom Kippur is just like us. Okay. Pray, fast. Now, when they have tefillah, they go to the synagogue, which is walking distance. Usually there's synagogues. I mean, there's only 2 communities right now. There's one in Shechem and there's one in Holon. Is within less than a 5-minute walk, because in the Torah it says that you should not, on Shabbat, you should not walk out of the Tchum, and to them the Tchum is a couple hundred meters. So you will never see a Samaritan day out and about. They also wear their white robes, as shown in the first picture that I showed you. Those are the kittel of the Samaritans that the men wear. The women might be dressed up in nice clothes also, but they don't have a special robe like that the men do. Also Sukkot. Now Sukkot is interesting in itself. Sukkot, as we know, you shall sit in the sukkah for 7 days. It's written in the Tanakh. Their sukkah is actually not outside. What they do is they hang fruit from the ceiling of their dining room. Now, why is that? That seems sort of odd. Now, if they are the original Jews, and we're going according to what's written in the Tanakh, if they sat in Sukkot, in huts outside, it would be sort of contradictory to have fruit hanging from the ceiling of their dining rooms. They explain this as following: because they've been persecuted over thousands of years, they brought the fruit, they brought the decorations into their homes so that the people outside wouldn't realize that they're celebrating this holiday. Seems logical to me, but we have Jews, our common day Jews, who did build a sukkah outside even though they were persecuted. So this is another reason why people say the Samaritans are not the original Israelites. They've interpreted things and adjusted things in order to fulfill their feeling of their surroundings. Now, there were Samaritans that didn't always live in Samaria. They lived in other areas of the world, but mostly in what today is Shomron. So sometimes they had to adjust. Now, as opposed to Judaism, mainstream Judaism, we don't make the adjustments that they make. They go literally what's written in the Tanakh, and sometimes they have to make like the computerizing of the calendar, which maybe we do that too. I'm not aware of that. The rabbis sit down, they do the calendar. I mean, they do it for 20 years in advance. But they will make adjustments to modernity to make it so it'll be easier for them to live. An adjustment, I'll just give you an adjustment. One of the things that they have, which will be mentioned afterwards, is they can only marry within their own sect. Now, today there's approximately 800 HaShomronim. That's it. There aren't any more anywhere, as far as we know. They live in, about half of them live in Harbacha, in their neighborhood in Shechem, and the other half live in Holon. During the holidays, they all move. They all own homes in their neighborhood, near Shechem, and they all move there. And then the rest of the time they're in Holon. One of our participants here actually lives near the neighborhood that they live in. Maybe afterwards she can say something about them if she wants to. Because there are not very many people in their sect still around, they have made an adjustment. Listen, we have to continue being Shomronim. If we don't have people to follow, to have descendants, we're not going to be here anymore in another 50 years, 100 years. So they have decided that they will take foreign women to become Shomronim, that they promise to honor and respect the religion, take upon themselves all of the rules and regulations of their of the religion. And where do they take the land from? From Azerbaijan. That's the place they decided. They're Muslims. Some of them speak Arabic. They speak Azeri, but some of them speak also Islam. They bring them to here. They get married here, and they are part of the HaShomronim. These are women, because apparently there's less women than there are men, and they have children. You know, the average family is a little bit larger than the average family in Europe, probably 3 or 4 kids. When you go to Shomron, when you go to their neighborhood in Shem, I don't ever remember seeing women there. There are definitely women, but they stay themselves. They stay in their house. They are housewives, and the men are the ones who are out and about, which is pretty much the way it is in Islamic society. The men are out and about. The women are away, you know, out of sight. The Sukkot and Moed Shmini, which is Shmini Atzeret, which is written also in the Tanakh. I want to point out that on Yom Kippur, I'm not sure if I pointed out already, on Yom Kippur, children, once they are weaned, they fast. What does that mean? If you have an infant that's 3 months old, is no longer nursing, you starve them for 25 hours. No food, no drink. So in general, at least in past times, the weaning took place much later, the age of 2 or 3, so that the child was already could comprehend what's going on, even though they didn't agree to it. And why do they do this? Why do they starve their children on Yom Kippur? They starve their children because a parent seeing their child suffering and crying and lethargic has the parent themselves praying to God that the child should be okay, should recover, and that the parent will be atoned for his sins by allowing the child to be starving. He will take upon himself any wrongdoings and such. So this is one of the things also that the Karaites, they have the same custom of not allowing their children to eat on Yom Kippur or drink. They give them gifts that allow them to overcome their pain of hunger and thirst. It's a little bit difficult for us to comprehend, but that's the way they do it. Excuse me. We'll talk a little bit about the Passover celebration. Now, on Pesach, it's written in the Tanakh, in Shemot, about the month of Aviv. Aviv is not spring. Aviv is when the barley is ready to be harvested. That's the actual word, and Carmel is when the wheat is harvested. Now, we know the Feast of the Unleavened Bread, or Matzot. The translation might not be exactly what you're used to, but this is what I put up. And it's for those who came out of Egypt. And as I mentioned, the Samaritans' belief comes directly from Moshe. There is nothing in between. There's the Tanakh, and there's nothing after. So what they do is they believe in the giving of the 10 Commandments, obviously, which they are a little bit different by them, a little bit different. They're basically the same, but a little bit different. And that Moshe, directly the descendants from Moshe, and they came to Israel, which is Shomron, and from there, their lives continued. And as it says in Shemot, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year. So that is actually Nisan, right? That's Pesach. But I'm going to jump ahead where it says that on the 10th month, that take every household, every man should take a lamb, meaning 1 lamb for each household. Today, there are not a lot of families, so they take 7. And as we have seen, those of you who have been in the neighborhood, there are large pits, which they build a fire underneath. They take the lamb and skewer it, put it in there with herbs. And I'll continue reading here just for a moment. And if the lamb is, if there's too little for a lamb, meaning there's not enough people to eat an entire lamb, so they will give it to the neighbor, they'll share with the neighbor, which they still do today. And this is done on the 14th day of the same month, which is Pesach for us. And it's done at dusk. And they take the blood and they put on the side posts and on the lintels. The Shomronim today still put the blood on the lintels. They also put it on the eyelashes of their children to protect them against the angel of death. And then they shall eat the flesh in the night, roast with the fire, unleavened bread with bitter herbs, they shall eat it. So the herbs, there are herbs put on the lamb before it's put in the pit. They leave the skewer outside to remember the Paschal lamb, to remember the story of coming out of Egypt. And then it's covered with a clay lid and then wood on top of that. Also, it's cooked for about 3 hours. And around midnight, they take the lambs out. They're already roasted, and they eat their dinner. They eat it. Now, they might eat it just right there or take it back home. Again, they will share a lamb with other families because depending how big the family is, a lamb is a lot of meat. And with bitter herbs. So they actually take this literally. They continue with the practice of the Passover, of the Paschal lamb. Here we can see one of the pits. There's 7 of them. You can see the pit. Afterwards, they put the lamb in there and take it out. Okay, some biblical sources. The king of Assyria brought the people of Babylon, Kuta, that's a town in Babylon, and settled them in the towns of Samaria to replace the Israelites, which I mentioned earlier. Okay? When they first lived there, they did not worship God. So they sent lions among them and they killed some of the people. Meaning, this is what's written in the Tanakh, okay? In Melachim. When the people were brought from Ashur and they were brought to Samaria, to Shomron, they did not have the beliefs of the local people, the Israelites, or we'll say the Judeans for right now, okay? So what happened was that because they did not believe in Hashem, they sent lions to kill them, doesn't sound so great, in order to show them who is the mighty, the Almighty, in order to have them convert or assimilate into Judaism. Okay, this is another one of the texts that helps us understand that the Shomronim came from elsewhere and became assimilated. Then the king of Assyria gave this order: have one of the priests you took captive from Samaria go back to live there and teach the people what the God of the land requires. Meaning after the exchange, the population exchange between Ashur and Shomron, the Ashurim said, you know what, we don't want any issues with the locals who still stayed in Shomron. We don't want them to uprise because we brought all these people who are clueless about the religious customs and traditions that they believe in. So let's bring some of the priests back. And this is at the end of the 8th century, beginning of the 7th century. Bring them back and teach them the ways of the Israelites. And this way it helped them get more assimilated into the local population, not just to learn from the neighbor, but have a teacher. When we have a teacher, the teacher knows how to present the information. When we learn from a neighbor, which is great, but sometimes we're missing the essence, maybe we don't understand completely, a teacher knows how to teach. Right, Joe? I'm sure he's saying yes. So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria, came to live in Beit El and taught them how to worship Hashem. Now, the Shomronim did not live only in what today is Shomron. They lived in all the area. In fact, they lived in the area that was later on, when people were going on pilgrimage, the Shloshta Regalim, from Galil to Yerushalayim, they had to pass through Samaritan territory. This could have been a problem. This could have been something good, but this is one of the areas where they lived. There were a lot of towns 2,000, 3,000 years ago. What we have here is the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. As I mentioned, it is the only book that they have. They don't use any other book. They use only the Torah. You can see a little bit of the writing up here, which looks similar to ancient script, but not exactly. The letters are not exactly the same. But today, the Torah, they actually read from this, and he opened it for us. You can see there's 3 ktarim on here, right, instead of 2, or the one in the Sephardic. They read from it just like we do on Shabbat and during the week. It's actually Aramaic. It's not written in Hebrew that we know today. They have their own accent, their own pronunciation of words, which is a bit of a problematic issue because there's no nikud, there's no diacritical signs. So the issue of how to pronounce things is passed on verbally. True, we didn't have nikud either until about 1700 years ago. But for the last 1700 years, we know this word is pronounced this way and this is pronounced that way. Excuse me. But today they teach their children how to read the way it's written in their Torah scroll and their Pentateuch, and it's passed on from generation to generation, similar to what we do, but a little bit different because this isn't the language that they speak today. Today, although we don't speak biblical Hebrew per se, someone who knows Hebrew can read the Bible and understand almost everything. I'm not talking about nuances, I mean the words themselves. Okay, so the Samaritan text as opposed to the Masoretic text. What's the difference? The Samaritan text, according to the Samaritans, is the original text, not the one that we use in every day today. Now, we know from some of the Dead Sea Scrolls that have been found are also not the same as the Masoretic text. There are differences in them. There are additions. There are things that are missing. There are some places where a word is extra, or where the word that we read today, there's two words of the same, and they're not. I'm not going to go directly into it. But there's a lot of different things that are not exactly the same. So what I brought here was the pronunciation of some of the words. Obviously, it's in English, and it says, Sibora took a flint, and she circumcised her blocked heart, and she brought herself to its feet, and she said, you are indeed a bridegroom of blood to me. Okay, this is when Avram had his Brit Milah. And Maryam, Aaron, spoke about Moshe because of the beautiful woman whom he had married, for he had married a beautiful woman. Now, the pronunciation is very Arabic, but it's actually Aramaic. Aramaic is similar, it's a Semitic language. So the pronunciation is a little different. Those of you who have been to the museum and Yefet gives this explanation, he does read a little bit so you can understand the pronunciation of some of the words. In Exodus and in we have also Numbers, then we have the two texts that are here. We have that Zipporah took a flint and cut off the foreskin of her son and cast it at his feet, and she said, surely a bridegroom of blood to me. You see the difference in the words, the difference in the way. Of course, the pronunciation, I'm just showing you the pronunciation with the Zipporah as opposed to Zipporah. But it's the same word, but the words are different. As to cut off, to circumcise her blocked heart, or to cut off the foreskin of her son. Two different things, two different meanings. And we have also from Numbers about Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. Now, according to the HaShomronim, and also according to some scholars, Cushite doesn't mean they're from Cush or from Ethiopia or black or from or as a slave, but rather a beautiful woman. The HaShomronim accept that as the explanation. Actually, they write that in their text. Not Cushite to them is beautiful, but there are some people who give an explanation that the Cushite woman is a beautiful woman and not someone from a place, to someone who's beautiful. The Samaritan Pentateuch also commands that after crossing of the Jordan, the Israelites shall bring the 12 stones to Mount Gerizim, not to Gilgal. What we have here is actually a picture. You can see a wall here, but to the left of the wall, there's some stones. Now, on Har Gerizim, in the national park, I highly recommend going there, and it's safe. It's really nice to go to. They have 7 stations that they go on, the Samaritans, and one of the stations are the stones of the 12 tribes, and this is the location of the stones of the 12 tribes that I have in the photograph here. I don't have photographs of each of the stations, but they have a ceremony that they go from station to station, and technically, as tourists coming to there, you can't go into the station. You can see it just from outside the fence. The Samaritan script as opposed to modern Hebrew. The Samaritan script is more like ancient script, which is the ancient script, and we have the Assyrian letters a little bit different. But if you look here, you can see it's even the pronunciation of the words Aleph, Beit, Gaman, Dolot. It's very similar to the Yemenite pronunciation of the letters. The letters are similar to ancient script that we find in inscriptions, but not exactly the same. The basis of the Samaritan religion. Now we have in Deuteronomy, and it shall come to pass when the Lord thy God shall bring thee into the land where you shall go to possess it, you shall set the blessing upon Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal. Now we know that Har Gerizim is in one side, Har Ebal is on the other side, a bracha v'klala. But according to the Samaritan version, which is a little bit different, it's a different passage, but it directly has to do with the first passage I have here. And it shall be when you have passed over the Jordan that you shall set up these stones, which I command you this day on Mount Gerizim. You shall plaster them with plaster. This is not what's written in the version that we read it. 1 second. Okay. Some of the differences in dietary laws. Now, we know that we shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. It's written, so we don't have milk with meat. Easy, simple. Rabbis over the course of time said also no birds with milk, and the Sfaradim don't even have fish with milk, more from Marit Ayin. According to the Samaritan Pentateuch, it says, thou shalt not see the kid, it says forget the a kid in its mother's milk, for he that does such is like a forbidden offering. Meaning that we just say thou shalt not cook the kid, and here it says in its mother's milk, and here it gives an explanation why you shouldn't. Now, is this something that was that predates the Masoretic text, or is this an interpretation that came later? We don't know, but looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls, we're beginning to get some form of understanding of the different nuances of their text, of their Pentateuch. Now, this is interesting about the Samaritans. They eat 17 kinds of meat. I didn't write all of them down, but they eat chicken, rooster, quail, dove, sheep, goat, cow, and bull, but they do not eat duck or goose. Why? Because they're not listed in the Tanakh, and because they have webbed feet. Okay, so the feet are not, they don't have split hoofs, they're not mammals. But it doesn't say anything about webbed feet, so I guess they can't eat them. This is just a way of interpreting what's written. They do eat some locusts and grasshoppers. They are allowed to. The Temanim also do. When we have the locusts here, our bay, when I was in Bar Ilan, there was a bus that went south to the Arava to collect the locusts, to cook them, to eat them. I didn't go, but they did it. If you know Zohar Almar from Bar Ilan, he took a whole group of people to go and find out these locusts and grasshoppers. So it is possible to eat them. Now they keep 6 hours after meat before they have milk, but they also keep 3 hours after milk before they eat meat. So they've taken it a step ahead. Now this again is just a tradition. It doesn't say in the Tanakh how long to keep. It just says not to cook a kid in his mother's milk. And the interpretations came later. Now, because the Samaritans do not accept any of the interpretations, they do not accept the Talmud, they do not accept any of the rabbis. In fact, they say that Ezra, when the people came back, when Cyrus allowed the Jews to come back to the temple, to rebuild the temple, anything that happened after that is not accepted by the Samaritans, which is interesting. Some things are sort of touching upon some of what the rabbi said, but most of the things are just the way that they understood them in their own personal way, interpreted them, and that's what's written. Again, we're not 100% sure if the book that they read, or the Tanakh, the Torah that they read, is the original, or there are some changes that they made over time. We do not know. The consensus basically is that they made changes. But some of the things we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls are what's written in the Samaritan Torah. And again, it might be that they were a different sect and they had a different version. Research is ongoing. We know that the Samaritans sided with the Israelites' opposers, meaning that when Ezra and Nehemiah came back, when that time of Ezra and Nehemiah want to go build the temple, although initially the Samaritans said, we'll come and help you build the temple. But Zerubbabel said, no, we are not taking you. You are foreign. We don't want you. It says in the Tanakh, not all that, but to understand it. Whereas on the other hand, they wanted to help, one, or because they are now assimilated and wanted to help and be part of the return and the building of the temple, because that's what you do. They're now Jewish and they want to, Israelite Jewish, and they want to participate. On the other hand, they wanted to respect the people who came back to rebuild the temple. Sometimes we just give respect to somebody. We try to help them to overcome something bad that happened, like the destruction of the temple, and being sent away and then being allowed to come back. And sometimes we just want to make sure that the locals are happy and they're not going to bother us, whichever way you want to understand. The decisive schism between the Samaritans and the Judeans. Now we know the Judeans came back. They were brought at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, after Cyrus said that they could come back, which would have been at the end of the 6th century. Now, if we go forward, it's not on here, but we go forward to Alexander the Great. We know from that period of time, there started to be a lot of antagonism between the Judeans and the Samaritans. It got to a head when John Hyrcanus destroyed Samaria, the city of Samaria, in the 2nd century before the Common Era. He went and destroyed it. He said, that's it. These people are no good. The reason behind this would be because in that period of time, during the HaShomronim period, the rule was if you wanted to live in Judea, although this was Israel, but it was already a United Kingdom, it was one place, you had to be Jewish. And the HaShomronim were already not so in tune. They did not really like the idea of being under Jewish rule, although they accepted it. They accepted it on Eruvim Mugbal that, okay, we'll deal with this. But once John Hyrcanus Yochanan came and destroyed Samaria, that's it. If you're that nasty and you're that terrible and that you hate us that much, we don't want to have anything else to do with you. And that was the schism. That's it. We're not part of you. You're not part of us. Leave us alone. We'll leave you alone. This was also a very big period of change in the Torah, in the Dead Sea Scrolls that I mentioned before. We start seeing things that are a little bit different than the Masoretic text that we use today. As we know today, when we copy from a Torah scroll, the scribe, the Sofer Stam, copies word for word, top for top, everything exactly the same. So if somewhere 2,000 years ago, 2,200 years ago, someone made an error, wrote an extra word, left out a word, put the same thing twice, whatever, it's been copied over 2,200 years. But there are texts that have survived that predate that zero spot where they started copying from. Now, are these purely Samaritan texts? We know from, all of us have been to Qumran, and there we know, if you, in the film, I don't know if they mention it, that there are texts that are not, I'm talking about Tanakh, not the external text, that are not exactly what we use today. Now, is it because of the sects who went to the Dead Sea area and they changed the wording, or was that the original text that was changed over the course of time because somebody made an error and put an extra bet or something? We don't know. They're doing research to try to find and compare texts and to see what the differences are, the different nuances in the way they're written. And if the Samaritan text, some of them are very similar to the Samaritan text. I'm not talking about the letters. which is very interesting because today the Samaritan Pentateuch is written in the ancient script, not in the Hebrew of today. Today we use the Syrian script, which is what everybody can read. Even when I go to Israel Museum, and we probably all do that, take them up to the book of Isaiah and say, look, even though you can't read Hebrew, can you distinguish between the letters? Absolutely, it's still clear. But the documents that they found, the fragments that they found that are believed to be Samaritan are in that script and not the script that they use today. So it's sort of odd that they would have gone back to this script. So were some of the people in the Dead Sea area part Samaritan? Did they at some point say, okay, the Judeans are now using this script, we're going to go back to the ancient script? There's a lot of questions out there. I don't have answers. Okay. Around the turn of the first millennia, a Proto-Masoretic text was chosen by the Judeans, which I just mentioned, and the Samaritans kept the original one or went back to the original one? That's the question. Okay, during the rule of Antiochus Epiphanes, the Samaritans refused to assimilate, which is what I just mentioned, and as opposed to the Edomians and the Galileans. As the HaShomronim made everybody convert, not everybody wanted to convert. Those of us who've been to Beit Koren and the whole spiel that they give about the Edomim who lived there, and some of them didn't want to stay there, so they threw all their stuff in the caves and they left. But some of them did convert. Apparently, the HaShomronim hated the Judeans so much, they said, no way, Jose, are we going to be part of you. Leave us alone, we're here, just go. During that period, they did have self-dominance under Jewish rule, but it was sort of, it wasn't a very clear-cut case of, okay, we can do what we want, and the Jews are going to leave us alone. There was antagonism there. Once Pompey came in the first century, before the Common Era, the Samaritans actually had more freedom. They had more freedom, and they spread. Some of them lived in Syria. They were able to move out into other areas also. What we have here is Sebastia. This is a theater in Samaria. Okay, Shomron. Sebastia, Herod built it and named it after Augustus, who was his friend. And this was after Shomron was destroyed. Herod built this, as I mentioned before. John and Yochanan destroyed the city, and Herod came and rebuilt it in around in the 20s before the Common Era. The site is gorgeous. It has a lot to see. Unfortunately, it's been looted a lot. The antiquities looting it, but the site itself is in Area C. The parking lot's in Area B. And the road that you go there, we're not supposed to go on there without an army escort. So it's hard to get there. But it's a nice site, nonetheless. In the Talmud, in the Tractate of Kutim, it's written, when will we accept them? Meaning, when will we accept the Shomronim? When they deny belief in Mount Gerizim and confess Jerusalem and the resurrection of the dead. As I mentioned, the Samaritans do not believe in the resurrection, right? Everybody, all the people buried on Har Zeitim, the Mount of Olives, all of their feet are facing the Temple Mount. So when the resurrection occurs, everybody will go up to the Temple Mount, right? The Samaritans believe in the Sheol, which is a continuous life in the underworld. They do not believe in the Mashiach. They don't believe the Mashiach is going to come. They don't have a word. They do allude to him, but they don't really say that there is a Mashiach. And the continuous life in the underworld means that there is some type of life afterwards, but it's not an afterlife on earth. Of course, all this is theological issues, but it's just those are the two differences in that respect. We have to go into the New Testament a little bit also because the Samaritans are mentioned in the New Testament. Although the Christians during the Byzantine period despised the Samaritans, they are mentioned in a good light in the New Testament. We know the story of the Good Samaritan going up. A man was going up a road from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers and left half dead. A priest happened to go down the same road he was going down, meaning he was leaving. And when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. And so did a Levite. The Samaritan went and took the man, took him to an inn, bandaged his wounds, took care of him and everything. we know that story. This story is actually one of the first stories that were used by anti-Semites already back in the 14th century to say how terrible the Jews are. Why did you leave this man for dead on the side of the road? Look at the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan, the reason that the Good Samaritan was able to go and take care of this person is, even though it says that the priest and Levite, it says that the priest was going downhill, the road isn't the road that we drive on, Road 1. It's a road that's parallel, that's north of it. And there were hills going up and down. It wasn't a go all the way down. It was a little hilly. It's possible he was going down to go back up. The Jews were coming from the north, from the Galilee, going to, for Pesach. And if they would have taken care of this man and he was dead, they wouldn't be allowed into the temple. They will have traveled from wherever they traveled for a day, for 3 days, for a week, maybe for 3 weeks, and have forfeited everything. When we look at it in that light, we understand why the Levite and the priest didn't take care of him. And because we know that the calendar, the HaShomronim calendar, is not identical, it wasn't Pesach for the HaShomronim, who in any case were not going up to Jerusalem. They would be going to Mount Har Gerizim. But it's possible the HaShomronim, just like we know from the inscription on the chalice inscription that anybody can come up to the temple, the HaShomronim could also go. Also, the non-Jews were allowed to go, and sometimes, just like we go to Har Gerizim to witness the Passover celebration, so did the HaShomronim apparently go up to the temple to see what was going on there on Passover. So we can understand the story in that respect. Unfortunately, over the course of history, Christians who hate the Jews will take something out of context and change the meaning of it in order to show their inner feelings. Okay, also in the New Testament, there's Samaritan woman, which this is very interesting. So he came to the town, this is Jesus, in Samaria called Sychar. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus sat down by the well. It was about noon. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, okay, Jesus said to her, "Will you give me a drink?" And the Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink?" Because in that period of time, there was total animosity between the Jews and the Samaritans. They didn't talk to each other. But Jesus can see here, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. And therefore you can see here in this particular text that the schism was there. There were the Jews, there was the Samaritans. Jesus was Jewish, and we can understand from this that obviously I didn't put the whole thing here. There's a whole theological thing, but I'm talking about the words themselves, that it shows that the Jewish people could not accept the Samaritans at all, even to give water to someone who's thirsty. Okay, the Samaritans through the ages, the late Roman period in the 3rd or 4th century, there was a Samaritan writer called Marco, who wrote Mena Marca, which was a Haggidic midrash in Aramaic about the Pentateuch, and this is the base. We have the Talmud, so this is the base of their interpretations of the laws that they follow. And by the way, they do practice wherever possible the 613 laws. The Samaritans were actually widespread in Egypt from the period of the Ptolemies until the 18th century, meaning 200 years ago. There were Samaritans all over. Unfortunately, they've always been persecuted, as we'll see here. In Babylonia, they lived from between the 3rd and the 8th century, in Syria and the 12th century. This is all from written works. There are written documents and books, and people wrote things, as we know. So this is from those sources. They were persecuted just like the Jews when Christianity became the official religion. The date that's here is the date that I took off the internet, but it doesn't mean specifically here in Israel. It means in other areas. Zeno, who was Roman, destroyed their second temple on Mount Gerizim, and it was never built there again. And this is where the church was built. The church that you can see, if you can see the back one behind me, okay, that's the church that was built. It's an octagon. just like the Dome of the Rock and all kinds of other places. They built a church upon the spot of their temple, which apparently holds the threshing floor where upon that Abraham went to sacrifice Yitzchak. They say they have all kinds of different interpretations. And it's under that floor. Today, there's another floor that's on their 7 stations that has been adapted for their Passover ceremony, which probably is not the actual place, but it's close enough. It's only a couple meters away. There was a Samaritan synagogue in Rome that was destroyed in 500 CE. Under Justinian, he took 20,000 Samaritans into slavery for defiance for religious defiance. The Samaritans were not Jewish, but the Romans allowed the Jews to be Jews, but these Samaritans are sort of Jewish, but they're not really Jewish. It was sort of a mixed area there, and he declared them unlawful. So many of them converted to Christianity, and the population started decreasing. Of course, that was 1,500 years ago, but over the course of time, there's a lot of written documents that say how the HaShomronim, how they were managing, where they were living, and how they were doing. And then the authorities didn't like what they were doing, so they would massacre them. It was something that repeated. It's the same thing that happened to the Jews, in short. Here you can see also it's from a different view. You can see here the synagogue, the church is here. This is the outer wall inside of it. And thank you very much for listening. I'll look now at let me just get out of this. Oh. Okay, chat. Just a second. According to the Assyrians brought other nations into the land of Israel, not Assyrians. They brought people. They brought people from Assyria. It says other nations. They brought people from elsewhere. No, the book of Joshua is not accepted. They only have the Pentateuch. They do not accept anything else. Joshua is not accepted by them as canonical, although they have some external books. Balat Gemara, it's a similar space. Letters in brackets are suggesting missing letters. Okay. They also don't have 5 Inuim. Okay. After the experience of seeing Korban in its entirety, getting blood sprinkled, smeared on eyes, foreheads, one wonders if there are any vegetarian Samaritans. Well, their law is that they have to eat from the Paschal lamb, so I guess not, but maybe yes. By me on genetic study comparing Samaritans, Jews, and Palestinians. Is there any way that you can give us the article there? If you can, that would be great. Do they have Hiroshima in their Bible? Yes, they do. I mentioned one of the books, Marka something. That's one of them. I didn't write everything down. No final letters, which makes it harder as well. That's true. They have no final letters, but that's the way it is in the Tanakh anyway. They have spaces between the words. Persian Jews, Masoretic is not to eat duck and goose. Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's interesting. And it might just be that particular tradition was brought from, not from Assyria, from Persia, from wherever, the area of Iraq today. Very possible that it was brought from there. We don't always understand where certain Masorot come from. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. How much longer will it be accessible? What? Har Gerizim is open. It's Har Bracha. You go to Har Bracha and it's another, 300 meters from there. They're not closing that. Anyway, the Samaritans do not want to be in the Palestinian Authority. They want to be in Israel. That's why they live in Koren. During the period that from 1948 to 67, they all lived in Koren. They didn't live at all in Shem because they were persecuted, but the Jordanians allowed them to go up to do their ceremony. They had a special way to go there. And after we came in 67, they built their neighborhood. So all the houses you see there were built since 1967 in that neighborhood. And they're specifically not inside Shem, but on the outskirts, purposely. Usually on my 2 days when you can just come in the morning too. Oh, okay. Barney is saying that we could go to Samaria during Chol HaMoed. That's true. Not this year though. Okay. I've also been to Samaria without the army, but I know they had to let the army know that they were coming there. I guess it depends on what's going on. Daria, if you would like to add something about the people in Chulon, that would be great. Daria is a new member of Isra Guides, and she lives near the neighborhood. Daria, do you want to unmute yourself? I can't do that. Or Judy?
Hi, I can try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is the first time I don't have my camera available, so you're going to have to just stick with my voice, if that's okay. Thanks. It was a great presentation, and you pretty much covered everything, especially about Kiryat Luza. But here in Koren, the Samaritans have been here since 1955. The little neighborhood was established with the help of Yitzchak Ben Zvi. Of course, he had such a love for the minorities, and it's a smallish neighborhood. They have their own synagogue, and the difference here is that the Samaritans are very integrated into Israeli society. They do speak Arabic, they do speak Hebrew, and pretty much all of them serve in the IDF, the males anyway. And they've had some pretty prominent roles in our community. We've had a deputy mayor who is a Samaritan, and we have school principals that seem to specialize a lot in education with their own children, especially. The children go to normal Israeli schools, but in the afternoon they go specifically for education in the Samaritan Torah. So they actually like visitors, they like guests. You can't really tell the difference between a regular Israeli and a Samaritan Israeli. They look the same, just when they dress up with their white robes. A lot of their celebrations they do here in Holon. And then, of course, they do go up to Har-Gerizim too. So, I unfortunately don't have any contact details or anything. I just sometimes wondered if anyone wants to know, the community, their little neighborhood is right near the Holon Mall and near the Children's Museum. So.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? So. Look forward to tomorrow. Joe is doing his thing on for Moshe Derech. And Joe, do you want to give something? Do you want to say something? This is an ad for Moshe Derech, not for Isra Guides.
Yeah. So thank you. Can you hear me? Oops, probably can't
Yeah.
hear me right now. You can hear me, okay? So,
Yeah.
Chana, it was very interesting. Thank you. I haven't been up there for about 5 years, so it was very helpful. So we'll have a lot of fun tomorrow afternoon at 4:30. You register through Moreshet Derech, and but you don't have to pay anything. And it will be some theory, as well as a lot of examples of songs and folk dances that relate to mostly to place names, sites within Israel. So at the end, I'll be happy to give the, all you have to do is send me an email, and I will send you a link to my whole matzeget, which there's about 40 songs there, mostly with translation, all with translation, some with transliteration, and it should be fun. Join us. Thank you.
So you didn't have to give us your whole song and dance. Chana, I just wanted to...
Tomorrow though, Barnea, tomorrow.
Chana, I just wanted to share a point which I got from Yefet over visits, that the stress on the origins being in their interpretations of the text, so that the explanation of what happens on Yom Kippur you describe very beautifully, but it's because it says Tuna Kol Nefesh, it's every soul. And the reason why it's the oldest high priest is because it says Hagadol Me'echav. And the fruits would be pre-Eitz Hadar, all the citrus fruits, and it used to be outside, but because of Pikuach Nefesh, they moved it inside. Also, the Kohanim never used to cut their hair because they don't have the Gzeira Shava of different psukim that the Gemara Kedusha means, so they didn't. But when it was too dangerous because of the reactions of the Arabs in Shechem, then they did. And he told me once that around World War, the best thing for yeshiva boys is Meseches Kiddushin, because in Mesechet Kiddushin, you have most of these Gzeira Shavas that they don't hold of and therefore do things differently. But he told me that in World War I, there were 100 and a couple Samaritans left alive. When I started going there soon by the Torah course, we're at 630, and there was a newspaper that came out with a banner headline, a lady had twins, right? And I always used to use as an example of, can you imagine for the Jewish people, you know, that you don't want to hurt your brother. If you're only 100, wouldn't you forgive and forget and, you know, appreciate Rabbi Kowalski's that self in there soul used to bring the Yerushalmi, that's the butcher accidentally cut his right hand while he was cutting. So would he take that right hand then cut his left hand? No, it's the same body. I thought it was a beautiful example. Unfortunately, I think they've also taken some Jewish women. They pay very, very well to join. I thought he told me that also some Jewish women joined, which saddened me about.
When we were there a couple of weeks ago, he said they only take women from Azerbaijan.
I hear. Okay, I'm happy to.
That's what he said. Maybe there was some point where Jews could join. I don't know.
Right.
Women.
Okay, I've heard from him. This is Yui. I've heard from him and some other Samaritans that, of course, in Cholon, okay, they have no problem whatsoever in getting Jewish girls. Okay, they go Jewish girls. It's just the Samaritan community in Kiryat Luza, on Har Grizim, they take from Azerbaijan.
Okay. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Europe, correct. And you have to know that there are Samaritans, Shomronim, who serve in Sahel and have reached high ranks in Sahel as well. The question that that we have here is Kiryat Luza. Then I don't know, because I don't have the maps. Is that when you call it in the Trump plan of the sovereignty plan, is that going to be within Israel, or is it going to be on the Palestinian side?
I think that it's on our side. It's just settlement.
You know, according, as you said, if it goes according to their wish, then it's on our side. They want to be on our side. But who knows? I don't know.
That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't mean anything, but I can't see them staying there if they're going to be on the Palestinian side. They'll come and live in Cholan.
Yes, but their site
It's the holy mountain. If their holy mountain is where it is, then they might just stay where they are, just like they did for all those generations when they were persecuted.
They weren't there when it was under Jordanian rule. They were in Cholan. They left because they were persecuted.
You also had down in Shechem. You had Samaritans. I remember in 1968, okay, going into Shechem and meeting Samaritans who were down in Shechem and had been there, okay, since they were born, okay, and seeing the old Beit Knesset down in Shechem with the original, the Sefer Torah that was stolen, the two Sifrei Torah that were stolen, okay, and are now in Jordan in Palestinian hands. They were never returned. And so they had been in Shechem the whole time. I remember being with them there. And so but they withstood all that persecution all those years. They might be saying, well, we're not going to desert our holy mountain, okay, just like they did in the past. And so who knows? We don't know. And but Chana, thank you for all the organizational aspects. Okay, thank you. I'm really sorry I wasn't able to join you on that day. But I heard it was great.
You had other important things to do that day. We know. It's okay.
Anyway, Chana, thank you very much. This was very interesting, and I was there for one of their Pesach Sheni celebrations, and it was incredible. And I
Pesach
encourage.
Sheni or Pesach?
It was their Pesach, our Pesach Sheni. It was our Pesach Sheni, and it was a celebration. I couldn't join in, but okay. Anyway, thank you very much. This is very interesting. Guys, tomorrow we have Frankie again. Please join us at 12 o'clock. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
And if anyone is interested in the Arabic, let me know. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.